Boom. Forget about that music. Cut the music. Brothers. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing great. Let's get this fucking party started, brother. Coaching 50% off still. Okay, a lot of clients from the summer have ended their sessions happily and dialed in. So there are more slots open. This is 50% off, 50%. You're saving thousands of dollars on each one. What I've been getting from people is folks that are coming on board going, hey, I've been really wanting to book you for coaching and getting my protocol, libido and erections squared away, but just didn't really look right for me price rise. Now that you offer the 50% discount, it was the perfect time. So if that's you, book. Got a good bit of slots, just had a lot of people drop off because the coaching sessions ended the moment you book. We're on a fact-finding call the next day, as long as it's on a weekend. And then we start. All right, a couple things to begin with. Hope you guys had a fucking great week. I had a phenomenal week. Let's talk about cream for a bit. Now, look, DHT is obviously, as I have alluded to, or as I've hopefully made really clear to you folks, DHT is the driver of erectile quality. It's the driver of erection sustenance. It is the driver of nocturnal erections and morning erections, as long as estradiol is in your, favorable state. And cream is the easiest way, as I said yesterday, to dial in. I have dialed in cream, one major time and then have fallen back to it if it was convenient or wanted to, make things easy or just kind of love the convenience of the application of cream. It's very easy. Many times I've been on cream in the right amount for me, which takes my total T to around 700 or so. The estradiol to 25 to 30. I've got a good bit of HCG in there, and I'm fucking phenomenal. But I just want to reinforce to people that, number one, the advice out there on cream is usually bad. It's usually to start with the high concentration 200 milligram per milliliter stuff and to do 4 pumps a day. That is usually not going to dial people in. You'd be hard-pressed to find a person that dials in very easily on that. I think you should start at the lower concentration stuff and start at 4 to 5 pumps with 100 to 300 IU of HCG a day, and then make minor adjustments from there. Any TRT protocol that you go on, if you can't tolerate AIs and dial them in to control estradiol, you want to start low so that you can move your way up. But I can tell you that, on my previous protocol, which is about 100 milligrams of a long ester and a small bit of transdermal scrotal cream in the morning, with 330 IU of HCG, everything was very fucking good. Nocturnals, morning erections, was horny a good bit of the time, erections for penetrative sex. But, having switched to cream because I went to Florida and it was easier to just fucking bring cream and HCG. I actually had to ship the HCG. Side note, what happened here? I think there we go. I don't know what happened. I think we lost me. Side note, I went, when I went to Florida, I had to ship the HCG just in case TSA, would fucking have a problem with it, because it wasn't labeled, it's UGL. I shipped it via FedEx to the hotel I was going to. That's it. And I picked it up right there and reconstituted it, and fucking that was that. But, since that, I would say all the stuff that happens when I'm dialed in is just a little stronger, just because cream gives you more DHT. It'd be the same thing as me dosing a little bit of extra DHT on the previous protocol, which I've done before and works. But honestly, yeah, I'm going to continue to try to reverse the bad conditioning of the folks out there saying DHT is not important after puberty. It's fucking everything. Try inhibiting it. Try blocking the enzymes and watch your dick fucking go to shit. And your mental state as well, if you're susceptible to that, which many people, more people than the studies suggest are. Anyway, let's talk about tissue level E2 and DHT. This is another thing that's really important. The serum can say one thing. You still want to keep the serum in good places, especially regarding estradiol, because that is somewhat of a surrogate of what's happening at the tissues, although we can't measure that. But to the extent that you can kind of ad hoc, non-scientifically measure or understand where the tissue levels are of DHT and estradiol, you should. If everything looks fine on the blood, you're probably just not getting enough tissue exposure of the androgens, specifically DHT, or there's an overexposure of estradiol at the tissues. And you've got to sort of get to the bottom of why that is. You can manipulate a good bit of that with cream. You know, high loads of cream, first of all, they're going to over aromatize, but second of all, they're going to create a lot of sex organ DHT, a lot of testicular DHT. And sometimes that's not the greatest for sexual function. It almost creates an AI-like effect. So you can balance that out with HCG, which creates the intratesticular fucking estradiol to dial in. Just a tip for folks. But you got to try to the extent that you can, be aware of those ratios and or at least the tissue level hormones. Again, it's non-scientific, but if you're aware of what happens when you're in one direction or the other in terms of DHT versus estradiol, you know how to modify it. As an example, I've run 6 pumps of the high concentration cream before with not enough HCG, and basically the male organ was just like dry, and it was like I felt like an AI-like effect. It was hard to get an erection, and I was like, fuck, well, this doesn't work, you know? That's way too much for me any fucking way. So that's one of the things that happens when you've got overages of DHT in the sex organs without enough estradiol. You do need a balance of that microenvironment of hormones, and that's one of the tricky parts that if you don't know that, at least people fucking not able to dial in a purgatory of not dialing in. Let's talk about libido that hijacks your brain. This should be the target always on TRT, and you can get it. You can get it. It is not difficult. It is largely a scientific process, meaning it's more of a science than it is an art. There's no arting here when it comes to TRT. You've got to approach this from a granularly logical point of view, as you would anything else with physiology, because it all has a reason why it's doing what it's doing. It all does. And we know a lot. And there's a lot of literature out there. And a smart person that's good at recognizing patterns and discerning literature should be able to determine what to do to create a state in which libido hijacks your fucking brain. This happens to me most mornings. But I mean, this morning I woke up, me and my girl had coffee. We chatted about our day and our lives and what the plan is later on today. And then we, you know, hung out in bed for, 10, 15 minutes. And I just became insatiably horny just with a fucking rager and went nuts. And that's where you want your libido to be. Don't settle for it not being fucking amazing. All right, let's get to questions, boys. If you got them, post them. Those of you that are here, post your questions. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Just give me one sec to make sure that the chat is working in my in OBS here. We start. We're live. What's up, brethren? We're live. Yeah, 6 pumps ultimately did not work out of the high concentration stuff. It was overage of DHT in the sex organs is what I would... It was basically an AI-like effect in the sex organs. I'm on 5 pumps of low concentration cream with 330 IU of HEG a day, and I am fucking dialed, brother. Been there before, so I just kind of knew how to fall back on that. Fade to black. Can androgel work as far as converting more DHT and less estradiol cream? No. To my knowledge, no. The test gel is not as, converting to DHT as cream. Ultimately, cream is somewhat of a gel base, but it's more absorbent and better. It ultimately is more of a cream than a gel, but plain old test gel is not the same. Yeah. I wouldn't be using androgel. I would shoot for 100 milligram per milliliter scrotal cream. It's 100% what I would do. I think that people have a hard time with stuff like androgel, just like they do stipinator, isn't it? They even prop sometimes. Everything is hard to dial in if you don't know what you're doing. It's easier to dial in if you've got the right information, the right strategy to dial in. PS Clips just started TRT plus HCG, and I'm feeling better. But chest feels tight, harder to breathe, and heart feels off. Is there any way to work around this? Well, I think the first thing you should probably do is just so that you can have peace of mind, go run labs on HDL, LDL, apolipoprotein B, and if any of those are out of range, try to take some measures to get them back in range. Just to give you peace of mind. I'm not saying that that's what's happening here. Also run hemoglobin, hematocrit. If they're high, that can cause exactly this sensation. At the same time, if you are not used to, which in this case you're not, increases in serum and tissue estradiol, that is going to cause this as well. Same thing with T and DHT. So this is somewhat of a common side effect that tends to go away over time. But you want to monitor those blood markers at the same time. If you're not divulging your dose, there's not a whole lot that I can even rework with you. What's your dose? If you want to post that again, do it either in a super chat or give me some context. Johannes, what do I think? 175 milligrams test how much Primo for E2 control. Between 50 and 100 milligrams a week. Yeah, that would be a starting point. Some people are very sensitive to Primobolan, so just be careful about that because it does inhibit aromatase at some level. So you want to monitor. I know guys that you can only get away with about 10 milligrams Primo a day, even though that sounds ridiculous. It's all they can take, but it sufficiently controls estradiol and gets them in the sweet spot. So something to keep in mind. Other guys, though, that I know and have worked with and also see on the forums can run fucking 175 milligrams a test, 100 of Primo, just all in one shot a week. And that controls their estradiol. Like, some very, very lucky few can just kind of throw boluses of shit together and it just ends up working out, ends up the tissue level of hormones ends up working out perfectly for them. And, they're good to go. That's not very common, but it does happen for folks. Darren, 4 pumps HRT cream, 100 milligram per milliliter plus 125 EU. Yeah, that'd be a good starting dose. As I said yesterday, that's right around one of the protocols that I suggested. It might be the case that you're under in some stuff. I think you'll be adequate in test and DHT, definitely, but you might even under aromatize at that level and it might not be your sweet spot. Obviously, everybody needs to find where their sweet spot in estradiol is. Generally, it's 20 to 35 picograms per milliliter is where everything's going to function the best. But you need to do this, and then after 2 weeks or so, run estradiol sensitive total T DHT, preferably on peak and trough, so that you have an idea. The most important reading, though, is the trough reading. Then you can ask chat, well, how much does this dose, estimated aromatize? Plug in the data that you have from your trough of estradiol, and it'll go, okay, your trough is 19, you're probably going about 30, maybe 35 or something. And you can kind of guesstimate what that is based on historical data of where E2 was, and hopefully you paired that data with what the state was, how erections were, etc. Look back at that and kind of understand where it might go based on how your dick is functioning, how it feels, sensation, how libido is up here, and obviously how erections are. Dark Fitness, thank you, brother. Appreciate that, man. I'm going to take that $5 and... What am I drinking these days? I'm not drinking Red Bull or even Starbucks double shots. I'm just drinking a bunch of, about 200 milligrams caffeine in the morning. Big cup of coffee with a tablespoon of instant in it, which I know sounds a little unorthodox, but great kick in the morning. And then I don't really use any caffeine throughout the rest of the day. Haven't taken a nootropic, but torque last week in a while. Just dialed in otherwise, man. My opinion on overmethylation and psychological effects may be elevated E2. What's my opinion on undermethylation and overmethylation and psychological effects? Maybe I do not know what you're saying here, man. I think people that attribute like some major problems to methylation issues are making errors in attribution. I don't think it's that important. Thanks, brother. Rack pull. I ran peak versus trough labs on twice-a-week injections of testosterone. Was very surprised how drastic the differences are. Fuck yeah. Nearly double on T and DHT and even to the mid-range SHBG. Yeah, the greatest thing about enanthate is that it it's not like prop or cream, but it does peak quicker and trough sooner. So, if that's better for you to dial in, which it usually is, the faster the ester, the easier it is to dial in. Then that is a cool thing. Yeah, I like enanthate for cycles. I will do it again when I run a cycle again. I'm not particularly interested or fiending for a cycle. I'm in a good place physique-wise at the moment. I'm very strong at the gym. I got crazy pumps and feel good. But the next time I do want to run a cycle, it's probably going to be for 8 weeks. And I'm going to go fucking hard and put down, hopefully 10 pounds of mass, maybe a little more. And it'll be testosterone enanthate, 500 milligrams a week. I'll work up to it though. I'll probably be at sports TRT 300 milligrams a week for 2 weeks or so. Let my body acclimate, and then I'll make that final jump up to 500. Probably have some side effects. I will have to take a Romacin to keep my dick working during that time. But thankfully, I dialed that in last time, so I know roundabout what I need to dose. Smirk! Good morning, Ryan. I'm on test sip, 100 milligrams per milliliter. That must be UGL. And been running 200 milligrams per week daily injections. So you're doing 30 milligrams, 28 milligrams a day. But I checked E2 and it was 111. Yeah. That's just you're first of all, you're over aromatizing on that. I mean, if I was injecting 28 milligrams of cypionate a day, I'd be at like 35, 40 estradiol. But that's just me. I don't aromatize a lot. I don't aromatize a ton, I would say. I aromatize kind of normally. But if your SL's 117 on that dose, that's a problem, bro. You know that's way too fucking high. Or your UGL shit is estrogenic somehow. Maybe there's some other stuff in it, or I don't know. Maybe it's over fucking powered. But that is pretty crazy to have that happen. Now, 200 milligram doses, regardless of how frequently it's injected, tend to over aromatize, but not that much. Not that much. Guy says he took an anastrozole 0.25 at that point and feel much better. Slept 8 hours. Yeah, I would not take another 0.25. You don't want to, you listen, you do not want to willy-nilly take an anastrozole. It was a good thing to take because you had data. You need to see over the course of a month by running estradiol labs after dosing that stuff, where estrogen goes from a 0.25 milligram dose of anastrozole. You want to be real careful with that shit, man. You do not want to shoot in the fucking dark when it comes to lowering estrogen. You inhibit the aromatase enzymes too much, you are going to be up shit's creek with a fucking laundry list of worse side effects than you were having at high estrogen. And you don't want that. So go run labs immediately after dosing that 0.25 and see where the hell it took it. Understand the half-life of anastrozole too, as well as, you know, even after the half-life, how much potentially it could continue to inhibit aromatase, because it will even at day 3, day 4, and day 5, just less. And start making some projections, man. This is not the time to act. This is the time to observe patiently. Believe me. Rack pull, yeah, maybe a little too drastic of a drop for me. Very inconsistent with how I feel in gym performance shots. Don't quite remember what you said before, brother. Yeah, I know it was about peak and trough of enanthate, maybe. Okay. Dream big. Does lowering your T dose and increasing frequency help solve insomnia issues? Okay, so I tried everything, including every natural sleep and pregnenolone help. Yeah, don't take pregnenolone with TRT. It's a fucking myth that you need it. It largely causes DHT suppression. It is a stupid fucking idea. You know, progesterone, which it converts into, you need a little bit of it, but largely that is a female hormone to balance estradiol, to balance the uterine lining shedding induced by estradiol in women. Progesterone also makes you a woman in the womb, so don't want to do that. Let's see. Yeah, of course it will. Yeah, because you're ultimately looking at one of the metabolites causing this problem, and it could be you're not used to as much T and DHT that could absolutely cause insomnia, but usually that goes away. But estradiol fucking tends to cause all kinds of problems like this if you're not used to it. Yeah, eventually guys on TRT can tolerate more estradiol in terms of nipple sensitivity and sleeping and all that stuff, but it never stops fucking with your dick usually. Yeah. JP, using a test blend. Injecting twice a week. Feel amazing. E2 300 milligrams is 166 UK metrics. So that is below range, it looks like, right? Like in range, I should say, if you're talking about nanomolars per liter. Think of using SIP at 200 split in a 3-week. Will I notice any difference in sex drive? I can't tell you that, man. 200 milligrams of SIP would be 75. It would be like 60, 120. It'd be 70, 140, 70. Yeah, you're like 68 milligrams each injection, 66 milligrams each injection, something like that. Might be fine. I would say this. If you're in range in estradiol and you feel amazing, change nothing. It would be a mistake to change. Listen, it would be a mistake to change anything that's working. Just a fucking mistake. But if you do change it, do notate where you are now and that current protocol that you're on works so that you can go back to it if shit hits the fan. You know, that's you got to establish fail safes. That's why for me, when I went to Florida, I'm like, I'm just going to bring cream. I know I can dial in less than 7 days on the shit, you know, because I know my dose on it. You know, I know roundabout where I've got to be. So I dialed in. I mean, the first couple days were actually amazing. Then there was a 1 to 2 day period where nocturnals and libido and sensation were a little off, and then that fucking bounced right out at day 4, day 5. I mean, now I'm just phenomenal. You always have to fall back on shit that you know works. You know, it is good to experiment in the beginning. With you don't have to be like me, right? But for future situations in which maybe it might be convenient to switch to cream on a trip or something, you got to know how to dial everything in. I can dial incipionate, enanthate, prob, cream for me personally with HCG and DHEA, whether it's a cycle or whether it's TRT. You know, it would behoove you to at least know how to do that, so that you can fall back on shit if you do something new you haven't dialed in for your body yet. Even if I try something completely new that I've not dialed in, I generally have a good framework for how to dial it in, but things will probably be a little sketchy in the beginning. Might have to make some adjustments. JP, will Proviron crush HCPG using 300 milligrams and SCPG is 22? 300 milligrams of what? Proviron? Don't take that dose. Dose is gonna. I mean, probably not gonna kill you, but that's not a smart idea. I think you might mean your dosing test. No, not going to crush it. We'll lower it, almost definitely. Crush it? Probably not. Probably won't crush it. Probably won't crush it. But you've got to be careful. You've got to be very careful. I had an interesting week. I want to show you folks something. Well, basically, I'll hook you right now. I won $20,000 at the casino. 20 grand. Yeah, a total of about 20. It was a 2, a 5, and then a 10, 4. Yeah, I won just about $20,000, and I did not do it willy-nilly. I am a highly structured, highly strategic person. I am what you would call an advantage player. I do not go to the casino or play online, mostly, willy-nilly and go and spin slots. You know, I am not an idiot, but I do advantage play. You should go research that. Advantage playing is essentially letting everybody fill the progressives, the jackpots in certain games that have progressives, paying attention to the patterns of when those progressives hit, monitoring and notating the entire structure of when they hit, and playing at an opportune time. You let everybody put in a bunch of money and get those jackpots ready to hit. The game has programmed metrics for when it's ready to release those jackpots. A lot of people do not know that. And then you hit it at that exact time. I'll show you the hit because I have the hit. Give me a second. All right, here we go. All right, so I'm going to shrink this a little so that you folks can actually see. I'm going to refresh it for you, and this was a hit on the 1st of October. I was targeting this progressive. If you look up here, I was targeting the tier 3. It was $10,251 at that time. It was the right time to spin. Again, I'm an advantage player. I'm not a gambler. I'm an advantage player. I play at the right times. I do not give the casino money otherwise. I largely win from the casino. And here was the spin. Look at my balance. I had 960 in there. 3 in a row. Tier 3 progressive. $10,461 on the 1st. If you guys want to know about how to be an advantage player, I will start doing consulting on it maybe, because I have won a considerable amount of money, not just 20 grand in the last week, but considerably more than that in the last good bit there. So anyway, just wanted to show you. Had an interesting week in advantage play. What else? All right, let's get back to questions. Smirk, the only thing I'm worried about, Coach, is my doc is trying to pull me off test because my levels for T are high. Not that high. Should I continue the protocol or wait? Put the protocol back in there and ask that. Again, you got to remind me of the protocol. I've got a lot of questions here, and my brain is thinking about a lot of stuff at the moment. Darren, do you have any clients who only have access to standard estradiol immunoassay? Yes, I do. Unfortunately, yeah. So we've got to go. We still run that just to look at roundabout where it is, but we have to go based on symptoms, and I've got to situate them. Like, I'm not playing games with AIs and trying to dial in that shit, because we cannot read it. We cannot accurately read what the hell's going on in those cases. I am instead employing fail safes. I know roundabout based on historical estradiol data for people, but just based on seeing so many people in these cases, like what protocols to put folks on where they won't over aromatize, or if libido, erection, sensation, climax is not quite right, which direction to go in at that point. I think everybody has to know that too. Yeah. Why is sensation dull? Well, there's many reasons. Sometimes it's too much estradiol. Sometimes it's too much DHT at the tissues without enough estradiol. Sometimes it's fucking blocking aromatase. There's many reasons why you can have sensation problems. Sometimes it's a lack of DHT. But you've got to look at the rest of the protocol, the doses, the historical data of labs, how the protocol is structured to determine which thing is causing it, and then make the adjustment from there. I've never used HGH. Don't really plan to. I'll use a little bit of ipamorelin. Didn't really notice. I think I had some blood sugar fluctuations that weren't particularly fun. My girlfriend, though, who was the love of my life, has used sermorelin for months at a time, and she got a pretty significant benefit out of it. Stronger, had more energy. I think she generally felt good on it. But if you skip a day of that shit, it does tend to fuck with your blood sugar levels. Nemo, once I heal PFS with the fail-safe protocol, I was hoping to experiment with some other protocols for mastering SIP. Cream to come off and use HCG and FSH to conceive. Is that possible? Well, it certainly is. Definitely. I mean, PFS can be resolved. It's just an endocrine system problem, which can be resolved. But it is not generally a good idea to go off the protocol that resolves it. Yeah, that would be a bad idea. I mean, that's like a dude who's tired all the time and has lethargy and brain fog, goes on TRT, gets it solved, and then goes, let me PCT off. Why would you do that? But I get that you want to be fertile in this case. You can be fertile on TRT. You have to have enough HCG in there and go from there. But the choice is yours. As long as you dial in and you know what it takes to dial in, you can do the fertility stuff and it might dial you out. But at least, as long as you can get an erection, you can get your wife pregnant. And then you just go back to what works, go back to what works. But it's a slippery slope there. You don't want to be exposed to too much estradiol too long with PFS. That's all. Because then it kind of just tends to regress you and worsen it a little bit. And, one of the most important things for folks with PFS is not to sit in an estrogen dominant state. You do not need any transforming of the vasculature of your penis in a negative way, which estradiol without the right ratio of DHT will do. So just something to think about. Where are we here? Oh, here we go. Yeah, might go with cream because it's hard to dial in, especially if you're overweight. Ooh. Yeah. Oh, cream is easy to dial in if you know what you're doing. What mechanism of PFS causes anhedonia depersonalization? That's a hard one. It's likely the lack of conversion of certain neurosteroids. I mean, you got stuff that converts to other stuff in the brain via 5-alpha reductase enzymes. So you inhibit those. And again, regarding neurotransmitters, it's the usual suspects: serotonin, dopamine, glutamate, GABA, acetylcholine. There's some sort of dysregulation there. But because of this, and ultimately, neurosteroids from hormones have a direct effect on those neurotransmitters. So there's something going wrong there. It could also be the case that a lack of brain androgen receptor binding with high affinity for long periods, which DHT does, can cause this too. Over aromatization in the brain can cause this. Yeah, you're not going to feel like the same person. So it's one of those things. G's oh yeah, the win. Yeah. Again, I am an advantage player. I am not a gambler. Gambling is irresponsible. It is a stupid fucking idea to not study the games you're playing, to not study the RTP or the return to player on the games, and to not know when the expected value of your coin in is higher. It's just something that I got into because my brain works in a way which discovers patterns. And yeah, I won $20,000 this week, but I've won more than that recently. I hit one line hit last week for $6,900. I've hit several line hits for $2,000 to $3,000. Just know when to play. People think you can't, effectively game in slot machines. Generally, regular ones on the floor do not touch those, but online slots or high limit slots where you can actually look at the progressives and study them, you can make a lot of money. A lot of money. MJ on 50 milligrams sip daily. Whew. What? $350 a week. Slight E2 high symptoms. 22 milligrams Primo C. That might help. Go by feel and EQ symptoms. The only advice. Yeah. I mean, how long it takes Primo to fully saturate? 3-4 days. If it's Primo enanthate, maybe a couple weeks. A couple weeks, but if it's, and that's probably all you're able to get is Primabon enanthate. I don't know if you can get Primo Prop, but I would use Masteron for that if you want something fast acting. Yeah, give it some time, but you got to meticulously run estradiol labs to see where it's going on this. But look, it's not a bad idea. If you're on $350 a week of test, you can, so long as you can tolerate estrogen blocking stuff, you can dial that in. TTV, that's awesome. Won 600 fucking K. What are you doing, brother? I haven't quite won 600, but that would be incredible. Are you also an AP? Have you studied games that you're playing? Are you card player? I know and study some card players that have beat the casinos in Vegas for tens of millions of dollars. It's something that I'm eventually interested in, but I've got to play probably about 5,000 hands of blackjack before I'm even confident playing. Thank you. What ester do you recommend for libido purposes? Too general of a question, and that's too general for you to ask. You can get libido that is insatiable on any ester. It's about dialing in. It's about the details. Thoughts on CoQ10 and PQQ? Marginal increases. I don't think, if those things were as powerful as people tout them to be, it would be, a fucking panacea. People would be going nuts. Take this. It rapidly increases your energy. It's just not it. JP, 300 milligrams test blend, as explained with everything in range. If I wanted to use HCG for fertility, how would I step carefully? You're asking me to do a live consult. In this case, it's a little more complex than that. You can book me livecortex.com if you want to talk about it, and we'll craft a protocol that makes sense. Mike, are you thinking about making a PSST PFS video or making a book? I am. I just have a lot of things on my plate at the moment. It's something I would really love to do. Yeah. I made a documentary about it, which does explain the problem. Being that you convert disproportionately to estradiol versus DHT, your testosterone does, and that is a problem. In time, I will get to that. In time, definitely. Jonas, there's no such thing as advantage plays. There's a thing called a gambling addiction, though. Well, if you want to look at my win-loss record, I'll prove you wrong. Yeah, email me. There is such a thing called advantage play. I think you should go Google or YouTube a guy named Ari. What is his name? Do this, since you want to think you understand more than me, who is an ultimate fucking pattern recognizer and have been studying this for a considerable period of time and have proven it to bear out in reality. Again, I just showed you a strategic $10,000 win. I was not trying to give the casino money, and I did not. Ari Mizrachi. Go study him. Ready? Ready, guy who thinks he knows about this stuff? Ari Mizrachi. Okay. That's in the chat. Go watch his videos on YouTube. This is a guy who works for casinos to consult them on how to stop advantage players. from winning, has raw data that advantage players generally do not lose and win most of the times they play. Yeah, you know nothing about the casino world if you don't know about APs, man. Gotta love people confident about shit they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. It really is a bizarre state. Nemo, can you go back and check out my super chat question? Did I miss your super chat? Nemo, can you describe the healing process that occurs with PFS after being on the right HRT protocol? Well, generally erections, libido, sensation start to come back rapidly when you're on the right protocol. For some people, it may take a little time, and there are some problem cases that require DHT itself. But generally, just like getting on the right TRT protocol, things start to come back because ultimately it's an endocrine problem. When you're starving and your body starts to get food, right away, good things start happening and shit starts upregulating and whatever. But it might take some time for you to fix your gut bacteria from being starving and a bunch of other things that might have gone wrong, potentially bone mineral loss, just to compare it. But the process of libido, erection, sensation, climax start to get better and gradually better, but noticeably better. It's somewhat of a fast process when you've got the right protocol. Until then, after in most cases, many weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks after the right protocol is achieved, everything is pretty goddamn good, at which point, usually no additional changes are necessary, but maybe some minor short strokes to perfect it are. And I'm talking about small changes in doses of one thing or the other, depending on what the bloods say and where everything else is. I've not tried this. This is a thing to ask Vigorous Steve because he has, and he's got a lot of great content on that. So I would go ask him. Joe, what's the best alternative to finasteride if you're already balding? There is none. Do not take it. Do not take an anti-androgen unless you want to potentially deal with the consequences of taking an anti-androgen. It is a stupid fucking idea, period, brother. Easy with the $20 super chat. My man, thank you, bro. Thank you, dude. You and your girl try some ice matcha. I mean, you know what? When we were in Florida, man, we saw, I've had matcha back in the day in my nootropics days, and I was like, oh, let me just try this. It gave me a stimulant effect, I want to say. But we were at a coffee place. We had this hotel in Miami Beach, and there's a coffee place in the hotel, which is convenient. But we got 2 coffees and a muffin, and it was like $50. It's so fucking expensive. Everything is ridiculous in Miami. When we moved to Florida for 6 months, we're not moving to Miami. We're moving somewhere else. Why is my... Here we go. But we saw matcha up there, and we were both like, wait a minute. Should we give that a shot? But we didn't. So it's kind of serendipitous that you mentioned that, bro. Because we fucking just talked about this. Thank you, man. Thank you, honestly. Yeah, I'm still planning on doing that. I am. Got us coffee. Can you recover from PFS while on benzos? This is a good question, and I think the answer is probably, but it's going to be a lot harder. Yeah, benzodiazepines via GABAergic, stuff like mess with libido a lot. So that is going to be hard. Yeah, it's the kind of look. So if I was doing coaching on someone with PFS, I'd be like, talk to doc and work with doc to intelligently taper off, and that's going to be the best chances we have of making this work. Yes, that is not. You're recovering from something so significant like that. You just don't want any other variables in your protocol fucking things up. You don't. The guy that said there's no such thing as advantage playing, go YouTube that guy and listen to his videos. Literally a guy that works with casinos. Casinos pay him a lot of money. And then they change the metrics and the APs don't win as much. It's a real thing. But, I mean, if you were into advantage play or strategic casino play at any level, you would know APs exist. It gets so bad in Vegas, by the way, another thing you probably don't know because you haven't studied it nearly as much as me, is that there are APs loitering at slots to wait for the right time to go play. Mike, just found out through a genetic test that my testosterone converts more into estradiol than DHT, which makes a lot of sense. Thank you for your videos. Yeah. Were you on finasteride at any capacity in the past? Because that would cause that to happen. Jones is saying someone is a con artist. Okay. Cool, brother. Cool, brother. You know what I think of when you say that? Nicolas Cage in Con Air with his long hair. I love that. Any other questions, boys? If you got them, ask them. Hubas had 90 picograms per milliliter too. Pretty not good, my brother. Pretty not good. Again, boys, coaching is 50% off still. I've decided to extend this for some time. I am unsure when I am going to revert it back to regular pricing. It's been successful over the last month and some change, and I've given a lot of people the opportunity to book when they couldn't otherwise book, which has been nice. You know, it's been good for everybody. It's good for us as a business, and it's also good for people to pay a lot less for coaching and get some of their hard problems solved. JP, how hard is it to get fertile if my FSH and LH are 0? Not particularly hard. I mean, you could do that on TRT. Everybody on androgens has got tanked gonadotropin, so it is not exceptionally difficult feat to achieve, but it's going to take some deliberate effort, some deliberate mental effort from you to know that that's what you're targeting, and therefore deliberate strategy to get that to work. I would go and watch Vigorous Steve on YouTube, because he kind of documented his journey in getting fertile after years of anabolics, and there's a lot of fucking good information. That's one of the only guys that talks about this stuff from a super granular perspective and uses the medical journals as references. That's hard to find. You got a lot of people just making claims and shit out there. Vigorous Steve is a fucking legend because he does the opposite. How do you recover from PFS? It's a very long answer. I've been over some of this stuff before. I would suggest watching the documentary I put out titled Post-Finasteride Syndrome Deniers, A Dangerous Precedent. Go watch that documentary and you'll understand at least the crux of the problem. Sub-Q seems to get lower aromatization. Not always. Sub-Q tends to increase aromatization for others. It's really weird. It's really weird. I think it's just because the fat tissue is metabolizing shit differently, and in cases where, at least if your test dose is too high for that sub-Q dose, you're just constantly aromatizing and you never get a trough. Whereas, look, if you do daily intramuscular injections of cypionate, you actually get a trough. You get a peak and a trough. That's one of the reasons IM is a preferable injection method over sub-Q. Kind of in any dose of cypionate, but especially as you go lower. To get your peak and then start troughing. The constant exposure to estradiol is fine if the dose is right and that number is right. But, if you're on any degree of higher dose, then where estrogen is not going to naturally fall in the right range, and that's going to be problematic. That is going to be problematic. Man can't see how they're pro-finasteride because of hair. Totally not worth a micro D. Right, exactly. Yeah, it's not worth having erectile dysfunction for 10 years. Like, if you can't figure it out and you don't bring anybody on board to help you, if you can't dial in TRT, because the information out there on doing that even is pretty fucking bad. So it's just playing Russian roulette with your sexual function, which as a man is a critical cornerstone of your confidence, your sex life, your dating life, your relationship life, is not a smart idea. It's not a smart idea. Why would you do that? I know why people do it, because people come to me with PFS and they go, "Well, I watched some of the pro finasteride YouTubers who claim the DHT stuff, like blocking DHT causing problems, is nonsense." They convince real people. People come to me with PFS in really fucked up states, psychologically and emotionally and obviously sexually and otherwise, and go, "Well, I watched fucking Hair Cafe. He got me to take finasteride and now I'm fucked." Swear to God. I swear to God. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I do not swear to God unless I am telling the absolute truth. Darren, is HIJACKS get dosed at 2,000 IU per milliliter? It's 5,000 IU per vial. It comes as a not constituted lipolysed powder. Mike was never on finasteride or any of those drugs, just antidepressants. See that though too can cause endocrine problems. This is what PSSD is. Yeah, post-SSRI sexual dysfunction. So yes, it's not out of the realm of possibility that you're also inhibiting DHT from those drugs. JP, since using tests slightly above range, semen volume is not the best. Well, that's a matter of testicular function. Test shuts that down. Have the right dose of HCG. Maybe take some lecithin as well, and that should help. Is pumpkin seed oil on the scalp good to block DHT on the scalp? See, I don't think so, because I think ultimately it is a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, right? So you don't want to introduce that on your body. You just don't. I think you're the guy asking for alternatives. You block DHT anywhere, you run the risk of persistent sexual dysfunction and persistent psychological problems, emotional issues, neurological problems, mood disturbances. You run that risk. I'm telling you, I have enough information. Don't do it. If you were me, you'd go, whoo. You'd know. Because you see it in real life. You don't, the studies on it, which say like some marginal amount of people get side effects, which would lead you to believe that most people don't, do not align with the reality I've seen. They don't align fucking at all. At all. Simon, hey Simon, happy Saturday, Coach. If you notice any particular difference between people who have PFS and people who have post-Accutane, it's pretty much similar. Both of them are blocking DHT, or are they pretty much? They're not exactly the same, but no one's the same. Not even two PFS people are the same. But it's a very similar condition. It's a very similar set of situations you've got to resolve, and the end outcomes of having enough DHT, not letting estrogen ever really go above range, having functional testes and neurosteroid support apply to all of those situations. Nemo, why do people report short windows of normalcy with PFS after smoking weed? Modulation in hormones and neurotransmitters is simply the answer to that. Yeah, all manner of people with that syndrome and similar syndrome dose all kinds of shit that give them temporary windows. Let me make a statement so that you have clarity. Those things that people take, lithium orotate, choline bitartrate, citicoline, cyproheptadine, mecunapurine, cabergoline, none of them, period, will permanently resolve the problem. This is an endocrine problem you need to treat with sex hormones. That's just it. Mike, interesting facts about my genes. Parents passed down a gene called COMT. Yep. This gene helps break down neurotransmitters. Unfortunately, I have a slow-breaking gene. Do you have symptoms? Are you walking around anxious all the time from too much catecholamines? Dude, fuck, shit, dude. My girlfriend's dog probably has this because she just will not relax. We've recently given her, this dog is like, it's a Bichon poodle, I want to say. And she is just anxious all the time. She's 10 years old with more energy than a 3-year-old human. And we've recently started giving her a combination of valerian root, chamomile, hemp, and a few other good ones that are GABA neurotransmitter modifiers, and it works. It works for 5 to 7 hours, and she is very chill. But maybe she has that. She has that. Anhedonia from Adderall. Adderall can cause all kinds of things, not least just sexual dysfunction. There are plenty of other things you can take to kind of give you focus from that neurotransmitter modulatory perspective, and fucking Adderall is not one of the things you should take. I used to, I do not do this anymore in coaching, but I used to consult folks who had, any variety of the sort of post-Adderall syndromes. It causes things long-term in people that are not great. So, not good. Steve, wonderful. What do you think of some men who say you have to have higher test levels for the best result in TRT because it's exogenous and different than what your body produces? Can they prove it? There is something to say that it is different, but you can't forget the other extremely necessary non-negotiables, which is that E2 has to be in your range and you got to have enough DHT. So what this here is a vague kind of clickbaity-like statement. There's a lot of vague clickbaity-like statements that are being made out there. So folks, you've got to approach everything you hear from a ruthlessly skeptical perspective as well as a scientific perspective. You should be skeptical of everything. You should be so skeptical of what you hear on YouTube regarding TRT that you should scrutinize my information. And then you should go hunt the literature down so that you can validate that what I'm saying is makes sense. You have to be. I'm telling you, the degree of specificity I have to use in dialing protocols in, the degree of specificity that I, just have to employ when thinking about this stuff, it is binary. Like, it is extremely nuanced. So, you can't be, so what does that even fucking mean? I get the general vague clickbaity thing they're saying. Your exogenous test isn't like your endogenous test at the tissue levels is what they're implying. They're also implying you need more exogenous tests than you would have naturally. This is not true. This is not true. Because what it doesn't factor, statements like that do not factor in metabolites and their balance, estradiol, DHT, both in the serum and at the tissues. Anyone making vague statements about TRT, you should at least question them on the comments or if they do live streams to give some granularity in terms of an explanation on their vague statement. Break it apart, right? Open the question up. So does this, like I would ask somebody who says that, does this imply that one does not need to manage metabolites because quantifiably on higher doses of exogenous test, you'll have higher levels of aromatization and reduction to DHT. So does this imply that you don't need to manage? That'd be the first question I would. If you commented that in the fucking comment section of some of these people, they'd go, someone just called me on that. Shit. If they know what they're fucking talking about, they'll respond in a complex way. If they don't, they're going to say something fucking vague and nebulous, at which point it's time to tune out. Time to tune them out. Any other questions, boys? If you got them, ask them. Otherwise, boys, go book coaching. Those of you business folks thinking about doing this, I'm a serious individual. I will send you upon booking a breakdown of the overview of communication and how the program works, what results we're targeting, track everything on the web, give you access to the document which tracks protocols, and I will do heavy thinking. I mean, besides content, that is what I'm doing throughout the day. Yeah, is thinking about people's protocols and sitting down with my laptop and in my office and cross-referencing situations with previous data and executing protocols and analyzing blood markers and all this sort of stuff. BookMeLiveCortex.com. All right, boys, I'm going to end the stream. Looks like questions got a little scant. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. What is it, Saturday? I've got an interesting day ahead of me. I've got somewhat of a funeral service to go to later for my girlfriend's friend's sister who died. It's more of a kind of a celebratory thing and like a life celebration. So those situations are a little sketchy. I'm not looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to walking out when we're finished. It sounds horrible to say, but after that though, kind of chilling for the rest of the weekend. Probably going to enjoy the last nice weather weekend that we're going to have before winter comes and fucks us. But there's always Florida, boys. Thanks for your questions. Much more content coming this week as usual. We're going to be cranking them out, so pay attention. I hope to see you there. Kick ass, rock on. I'll talk to you boys in the next one. Bye-bye. 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 Later. This is 636.